While Musk is also dealing with a new wave of resignations hitting Twitter. The employee exodus comes after the company's new owner, Elon Musk, asked his workers to commit to an extremely hardcore work environment or leave. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk has the late details.
This morning, the doors at Twitter are locked amid fresh turmoil and a mass employee exodus. Employees told the company's offices will be temporarily closed and badge access will be restricted through Monday, according to CNBC. On Thursday, a fresh wave of resignations rocked Twitter again after billionaire boss Musk sent an email to employees detailing his vision for Twitter 2.0. It read in part, "We will need to be extremely hardcore. This will mean working long hours at high intensity. Only exceptional performance will constitute a passing grade. The ultimatum, a 5 p.m. deadline on Thursday. Respond yes if you decide to stay. If not," Musk writes, "anyone who has not done so will receive 3 months of severance."
This kind of hardcore, make your decision if you're going to stay or go, not something that Twitter people are accustomed to.
That email from Musk prompted hundreds of employees to step down, according to the New York Times, citing 2 people with knowledge of the situation. Some employees who quit tweeting the salute emoji, meant to convey the message, "Thank you for your service." Adding to the confusion, Musk now backtracking on his hardline remote work policy. After initially telling employees it was no longer allowed, he now says all that is required for approval is that your manager takes responsibility for ensuring that you are making an excellent contribution. The latest wave of resignations coming after Musk already laid off thousands of staff when he officially took over the company. Melissa Ingle worked as a senior data scientist at Twitter. She says she was fired just days before Musk delivered his latest ultimatum, but has coworkers who resigned yesterday. She believes Twitter's future is hanging in the balance.
It just seems that with current staff levels, it cannot. And that's just flat out cannot be saved.
Musk has been tweeting overnight, posting a skull and crossbones flag, a meme seeming to show Twitter in the grave, and telling his followers, quote, "How do you make a small fortune in social media? Start out with a large one."
Let's bring in the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, Andrew Ross Sorkin. Maybe he can make some sense of this. Andrew, there's something, I mean, his behavior is weird at this point. I remember we had someone who knew Elon really well on the show recently, and she said Elon does what Elon wants to do. But at this point, Elon's behavior and his decisions are impacting the lives of people's, their jobs and their livelihoods, and also the future of a social media giant that has a huge part in our discourse.
Look, there's no question it has a huge part in our discourse, and there's no question it's impacting the lives of many who've been involved and worked at Twitter and their families for a very long time. In some ways, this is by design, though, in terms of Elon's design, that is. Yes, there have been some employees that I think he wanted to stay or was hoping would stay. But I think in truth, the goal was, in fact, for people who were not on board with this approach to how he wants to run this organization and what that means. He wanted them to leave. And whether this company can remain and flourish, I think that's an open question. There are people betting on both sides of that. There's some people who think there's just not enough engineers and other people physically there to keep things going, and that if in fact something were to break, that the whole thing could break at least temporarily. That's possible. But Elon is one of these people, as you know, who's been willing to have situations that have been a little bit messier than most others.
So I know we want to get to Goldman and Amazon and a couple other stories, but I'm curious, do you know anything about those who are leaving or have left in terms of how they fit into the infrastructure of Twitter and how it operates? And if more leave, what could happen?
Well, it's a great question. I've spoken to a number of people at Twitter in the past 24 hours who've left. Some who've left, some who left before, some who are concerned on the engineering side. I think that the biggest issue is in certain parts of the group, if if in fact something were to quote unquote break, something that would need to be facilitated, whether the site stays up. And when I say stays up, I don't. This site is not going away tomorrow or the next day. People yesterday seemed to think that somehow the entire site was going to break. I don't think that's the expectation. I think the sense is, could there be a temporary hiccup where you try to get to Twitter and it doesn't work for several hours or more? I think that's very possible. Is that something that he seems to be willing to accept on whatever path he's trying to get to? I think that's very possible. And I think we've also seen that. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying we've seen it with Tesla. We've seen the fact that, autopilot for a very long time has not necessarily worked properly. We've seen lots of component parts of the car not work exactly as planned. And he is one of these people who thinks that iteration in public on Broadway is an okay way to approach management. I know there's lots of other people who don't.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to get to a couple of other stories that you're looking at. Goldman Sachs and the possibility of a recession or not. Everyone wants to know where the economy is headed. And also Amazon layoffs. Could you update us on both those stories?
Well, I think the two things that are just worth talking about, Goldman Sachs is now suggesting that there's a possibility that there could be a soft landing. We've been talking about, is this a hard landing, a soft landing? What does that really look like? And I think that report is giving some people a little bit of hope. I have to say, the stock market looks like it's going to open up higher this morning. Actually, I should say just opened up higher this morning. We were looking at the futures earlier this morning. And what you're seeing right now is a sense that, again, this push-pull of, does the Fed pivot? Do they not? Do they pivot? This morning, again, we heard now from another Fed governor that was suggesting that maybe things are getting better. Just yesterday, we heard things that aren't getting better. So, again, maybe this is what makes a market. And then you were talking about layoffs. There are layoffs, more coming at Amazon. And again, when it comes to figuring out what unemployment looks like in this country, I think that's going to be a big issue. We probably won't really know until January or February, since those will be lagging indicators.